I've seen that there has been a huge link between when someone has experienced sexual trauma in their lives, whether it was experienced when they were a child or a teen or an adult, and then how that can impact their desire for sex when they are older.
Can past sexual trauma cause low sexual drive right now as adults?
Yes, I would say absolutely. Whether there is a correlation, a causation, I would say that at least in my work with clients, I've seen that there has been a huge link between when someone has experienced sexual trauma in their lives, whether it was experienced when they were a child or a teen or an adult, and then how that can impact their desire for sex when they are older.
And you say sexual trauma, and automatically I think to something like a rape when someone's young. But is there different classifications, or is there different? Does it fall on a different umbrella? What does sexual trauma look like?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because that can look many different ways. Rape is definitely one of them. One can be a sexual assault. So it can be a one-time experience that someone has with someone they do or do not know. There can be a reoccurring sexual trauma that's happening, again, with someone that someone does or does not know. So it might be a relative. It might be someone that someone is in a relationship with. Sexual trauma and rape can happen when you're in a partnership with someone. I think that's a big piece too, that sometimes people may not recognize, is that sexual trauma can happen with someone you like, know, and trust. And it can also happen with a stranger. And that there is a huge boundary crossing that happens when there's a sexual trauma that occurs or a sexual assault.
So this piques my interest then, because generally thinking, I would think that it's someone you don't know, right? Like a stranger in the street, right? So it's late at night in an alleyway, but you bringing up the perspective that, it can be with someone you actually date for a year, 2 years, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that look like in a relationship? Because it might be clouded that the man or the woman says, no, it was just part of like a dysfunctional sexual relationship that we had, but we loved each other and we just broke up. What is the truth behind that? What does it look like in the relationship?
Yeah. So in the relationship, when I guess one clear example that can be helpful is when we think about date rape, whether that's with someone that you are actively dating, or if we think about marital rape. So someone that you're actually in potentially a long-term partnership with. And with that, the definition of rape is that there only needs to be two things involved: penetration, and that could be with a sex toy, that could be with a finger, that could be with a penis, and non-consent. Those are the only two things that need to happen for something to be classified as rape. So if someone is engaging in some sort of sexual activity with someone and there is not clear consent, and consent is a big piece too, because sometimes what looks like or sounds like consent actually isn't consent. So that's a whole other thing. But if someone fingers someone, but they didn't actually consent to it, that's considered rape. And I think a lot of people potentially might be surprised to hear that, because sometimes when someone thinks about rape, if we're using that as an example, as a sexual trauma, they might envision that there has to be some sort of fight happening, or someone has to be screaming no. But that's sometimes that might be what rape looks like, but oftentimes it's not. It can be much more either like insidious or subtle or confusing, and then someone not know that was considered rape, and then them experiencing consequences, whether it's emotional consequences or physical or mental from that experience, but thinking like, oh, but that wasn't that quote unquote that bad.
Thinking about that changes the perspective, or at least broadens it for me. And you use the word confusing. I remember speaking to this girlfriend of mine, and we were talking, and she was talking about her past and this encounter with this guy, and she was confused as to whether that was rape. And I was like, that's rape. There was no consent, and you weren't even conscious. Like you were just in and out. And she's like, no, but we were friends, and like we talked the next day. I was like, that's rape, and there's a confusion of element of like, whoa, because he didn't force himself upon me.
Yes.
But the consenting, like you said, there was no consent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that piece up to the forcefulness, because that is a misconception that I think a lot of people might think too, that for something to be considered rape, there has to be some sort of forcefulness, and that is not the case.
So here we have a victim of sexual assault, or even not even knowing it's sexual assault, that something happened in a relationship when they were in high school or early college or something. What happens in the body? What happens in the psyche throughout the years? And how does it begin to change their relationship with the opposite sex, or just sex in general? What starts happening, and how do we start seeing the manifestations?
Yeah. So the manifestation of that can happen fairly quickly, or that can happen over a long period of time. But as you probably know, just from like the work that you're interested in, that how much trauma is stored in the body. And trauma knows no time if someone is not addressing that trauma, especially. So what that can look like for someone, if they have experienced a sexual trauma, and let's continue this example of rape, is that for them, not only, and again, it's not a one size fits all. So some people may not experience this, but I'll just speak into like common experiences that someone might have, is that they may shut down sexually. And that doesn't necessarily mean only to partnered sex, but including to themselves. So maybe if they were masturbating before, maybe they don't masturbate as much or not at all. Things that they used to find sexually pleasurable could be triggering for them, especially if what they experienced during the sexual trauma, if they're doing that to themselves, like let's say they're masturbating, it's using a certain toy that's reminiscent of the trauma, or they're with a new partner and their partner touches them or kisses them in a certain way that's reminiscent of the trauma, like how triggering that can be. And sometimes someone might be pretty aware of that. Like they may be like, oh, that's reminiscent of that. That's why I'm having this experience, this somatic experience of like heart racing, or like I need to get the fuck out of here, palms sweaty, like shutting down. But sometimes people just, they're not aware of how come they're having that experience. Because in part, they might be like, oh, that experience, the traumatic experience I had was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So they might not link it because they're like, oh, it was so long ago. So this experience I'm having now, it's independent of that. This is something else. But oftentimes that's a big contributing factor as to what's happening to them in that moment and what's happening in their body.
And how many people listening and viewing can actually relate to that, where they were like, I remember this experience where I shut down. I closed up, and it wasn't the guy. He was so sweet, or it wasn't the female. She was so sweet. It was something that happened where the body began to contract in memory, right? And all we need is like kind of like a trigger, right? It can be a scent, it could be a noise, it could be a certain kiss wherever it is in the body, something, right, that starts triggering that process. So, and you're saying that process looks like just shutting down sexually, where their body feels unsafe.
Yes, the body feels unsafe, and the body always knows. So even if someone's mind might be saying, oh, but some of the examples you're saying, like, this person is safe, I really care about this person, I trust this person, their mind might be saying that, but their body could be shutting down or experiencing anxiety. And that can look several different ways, whether it is, let's say for someone who identifies as a woman, they might experience vaginal pain during some sort of penetration with a sex toy, finger, penis. They might experience vaginal pain. Someone else might experience difficulties either keeping or maintaining their erection. Their trigger might look like that their anxiety then manifests in that way. This right now doesn't feel safe, so my body will shut down in order to protect me so that I can't move forward with this sexual experience in the way that I'm, intellectually I'm wanting to. And then the body might shut down with like an erection issue, for example. And it can be so confusing because the mind could be like, this person's hot, I want to do this, let's go. And your body is shutting down. And that's called non-concordance, when the mind and the body, it's not in alignment in that sexual experience.
Hey everyone, I want to talk about Birch Living. This is a partner we've been with for quite some time here on the show. You know, sleep is a top pillar of health, super important to me. It's why I always talk about it. Now, Birch is a premium mattress in a box company that makes mattresses and sleep products that are stylish, comfortable, and environmentally conscious. They're made right here in the United States. And it's important, always important, to choose a mattress that is high quality. Why? Because you're sleeping on it over and over. Your face is on the interface of the mattress, so you want organic and natural. I know that I can sleep comfortably because I know that I'm not being exposed to harmful off-gassing throughout the life of the mattress. Birch mattress is Green Guard Gold certified. That means it's tested for over 3,000 different off-gassing chemicals that you can be exposed to affecting your health. Now, I've had my Birch mattress for close to a year now. I love it. It's breathable, keeps me cool at night, relieves pressure points, allergen and mildew-free, and made of raw materials straight from nature. For Birch mattress, you get a 100-night sleep trial, along with a 25-year warranty. So if it makes you nervous, getting something you haven't tried, you get 3 months to make sure you love it. And if you don't, they're gonna come pick it up for full refund. And the best part is that Birch delivers straight to your door, free within the United States. It comes rolled up in a box, super easy to set up yourself. Now, I love my Birch mattress. Really think you will too. So if you're looking for a new bed, check out Birch. You can click the link below or go to birchliving.com/heal-thyself and get $400 off your mattress plus 2 free pillows. Now, with the current state of our climate, I've been looking for a good way to offset my carbon footprint, right? I didn't know how to start, and then I was introduced to Wren, W-R-E-N. It's a startup that's making it easy for everyone to make meaningful difference in the climate crisis. Now, Wren is a website, and it's focused on monthly subscriptions, right? So here, you can calculate what is your carbon footprint based on your lifestyle and offset it by supporting awesome climate projects that are gonna plant trees, protect rainforests, I was just in the Amazon, and remove CO2 from the sky. The goal is to unlock the collective action of millions of individuals to drive that systemic change that is needed, right? We need collective consciousness to make a change in the climate crisis. So signing up for Wren, super easy, and it's doing something meaningful about this crisis that is here for us and our children, right? So Wren practices hypertransparency. Once you sign up, you get a monthly contribution to offset your carbon footprint. You're gonna receive monthly updates about tree planting, rainforest protection, carbon removal projects that you're funding, and you can even see the exact coordinates of the trees that you planted. So it's gonna take all of us to end this climate crisis. We know this, it's collective. So do your part by signing up for Wren. Go to wren.co/heal-thyself, sign up, and they're gonna plant 10 extra trees in your name. That's wren.co/heal-thyself, and start making a difference. Thank you, Wren.
The memory, like you said, the body knows no time. So it can be 20 years later and it's like it happened yesterday, right?
Yes. Yeah. And what I describe to clients is that in a moment like that, you jump back into time. You time machine. You warp back into time because it feels so real. The somatic experience of that trigger, what you're experiencing in the body, it feels so real because it is real. You're having a very visceral response. And for some people, it's automatic. They could just be like, they flinch, or it can be very automatic.
Now here's the interesting thing that you have brought up. Yeah. It can manifest as the opposite. It can be hypersexuality.
Yes. Yeah. For some people, when it manifests that way, that maybe they then struggle with compulsive sexual behavior or they become hypersexual. Sometimes some things that contribute to that in terms of how the trauma can then lead someone down that path. A few different things, but I would say the most common one that I see when I work with clients would be that part of the compulsivity that they're experiencing is a way of trying to cope with their trauma. And then it ends up manifesting in that way. So they're trying to manage their experience by coping in some way. And that might be one way in which they cope in a way that's sexual. Because for a lot of people, sex can be relieving, whether it's through masturbation or partnered sex. There is a release that can happen for someone. And then it can shift what their nervous system is doing. So for some people, it ends up being that they go into hypersexuality.
Now, in your experience, have you found a distinction between genders, and if men become more hypersexual or women become more hypersexual, or vice versa, or does it just, actually pan out equally?
I would say, in my experience, I do work with more men in which they struggle with the compulsivity around sex. But I think part of that is, for many women, there can be a lot more shame. Not that there's not shame for men if they are experiencing that and then they're trying to get support around it. But for women, at least from my experience, there can be a lot more shame to identify with the fact that they're struggling with compulsive sexual behavior, because for them, there is more slut shaming around it. So there could be more shame, and then it can decrease the likelihood of them getting support for it. So it can be seemingly like, oh yeah, maybe more men struggle with this, but it might just be because in this scenario, like, more men are seeking support for it.
And that makes sense. When it, and I guess that turns into the sexual addiction part. Then is a lot of sexual addiction and this compulsivity and hypersexual behavior. Would you say that that's rooted in sexual trauma or abuse, or could it be other things?
It can be other things. Oftentimes, I would say 100% of the clients I work with who do struggle with compulsive sexual behavior, there has been trauma that they've experienced, but it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual trauma. It could have been physical abuse. It could have been neglect. It could be different forms of trauma that doesn't have to be sexual. But with everyone that I work with, there has been some sort of profound trauma that has happened in their lives. And then part of how that then manifests of them coping with that has been compulsive sexual behavior. And that compulsive sexual behavior can look many ways for people too.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to ask. What is compulsive sexual behavior? Is there a definition of sleeping with one new partner every week, every month, or what is it? What does it look like for people? So the viewers and listeners can go, wait a minute, I know someone like that, or oh wait, I had that, or I have that.
Yeah. So I kind of, I guess, like a simplified definition of that would be like out of control sexual behavior in which someone is attempting to cease or decrease that behavior, but they continue to do it anyway. So there's an out of control element around it, and they are experiencing consequences and are having a lot of difficulty stopping. And with that, if you think about different forms of compulsivity or different forms of addiction, that it's not as clear cut to say, like, let's do with alcohol. If someone's like, oh, if you drink this kind of alcohol, it means you're an alcoholic. But if you drink this kind, it means you're good. Or if you have 5 drinks, you're good. But if you have 8 drinks, you're an alcoholic. Like, it doesn't work that way because it's not that clear cut, but it is more so like someone's relationship to that substance, whether it's alcohol, in this case, we're talking about with sex, so that there's an out of control element. Someone's continuously trying to stop the behavior despite the consequences, but they continue doing it anyway.
And it makes sense. And in full transparency, we worked together, and I spoke about, after my mom passing away, my struggles with sex, and I jumped into the compulsivity for so long that I couldn't get out of it. And it was just how I handled that pain and anxiety and even depression, all of those emotions that wanted to be not seen, and I hide them under the rug, came out as this uncontrollable partner-to-partner sexual behavior. And I know personally what it feels like to be there. It is a tornado. It is a whirlwind that offers temporary relief, right? And it's sort of like, it is the addiction element, right? I can imagine how an alcoholic drink, when you're an alcoholic, offers temporary relief and then starts destroying the family over time. So I have a lot of empathy for people who are viewing or listening who can identify with this, or who have a history of this, or who know someone with this, because it can be very, very difficult. How difficult can it be for people who come to see you? What do the struggles really, really look like? How deep does it get for some folks?
It can get very deep for people. When you think about the consequences For a lot of people, there could be legal consequences. So if they're doing things that are illegal and then they get caught, whether it's someone discovers it or they decide to share that they've been doing something illegal, so people can end up going to jail for their compulsive sexual behavior, depending on how it manifests. For some people, there can be absolutely relational concerns. If they are in a partnership or have different partners, that causes a lot of conflict for people. There could be consequences to someone's career, depending on how their behaviors manifest. So I would say and financial for a lot of people. And again, it's not a one size fits all, because someone's compulsive sexual behavior can be compulsively watching porn, and they might be watching porn in which they're not paying for it. So maybe their financial consequence in that regard might look different than someone else who is paying for sex, going to strip clubs and compulsively paying for sex, or compulsively paying for someone at a massage parlor. Right. So that, those different consequences, usually like legal, relational, career, financial. And then especially if someone has children, that adds a whole another mix to things, depending on the impact it's having on the children. If it gets discovered, and then I've worked with people in which their kids find out about it. And that's a whole nother process to manage when the kids learn about this. And depending on the amount of detail that they learn about it, it can be very painful for everybody.
So many layers. And that's the part of the addiction for me. It was very hard to hold a relationship. It was hard to be in a relationship because I was in no place to be in a relationship. There needed to be so much healing, and there was a lot of infidelity because of that. It was the impulse that was overcoming the connection and love for the person, or really just the true respect that you would have for someone in a relationship without that. So I understand that struggle. But what happens then? What is it in your studies and in your work? Is it a trauma that causes a really profound impact on the brain and the brain chemistry? Is it a deep psychological adaptive mechanism that happens? Is there a genetic component? What is happening in the bodies of folks who are more predisposed to experiencing sexual compulsivity or addiction?
Yeah, I would say a mix of all of the above. When you think about nature versus nurture and epigenetics, and when people think how much addiction runs in the family, and they think about the multi-generational trauma, for some people, they might say, oh, there's a genetic component to that. And they can be hard to tease apart, like how much of it was their genetic component versus the environment and one grew up in, and that being passed down from generation to generation. So there are people in which they can find themselves to be more predisposed to struggling with any form of addiction, and then it happens to manifest in this example with compulsive sexual behavior. So I would say that with everyone I've worked with, I can't think of anyone that comes to my mind, because I also work with partners of people that struggle with the compulsive sexual behavior. But if I'm thinking about the person with the sex addiction, I also can't think of anyone that's come to my mind in which they did not have someone in their family who also struggled with an addiction or several addictions. Whether it was a parent, whether it was a grandparent, whether it was a sibling, usually it's like kind of a combination of those. But I haven't worked with someone in which they're like, I'm the only one that I know in my family history that has struggled with some sort of addiction. Yeah,
it's something you'd expect, right? Like you hear alcohol addiction too, right? All forms of addiction. There's a component in the family where someone says at some point, my uncle had this, or my aunt struggled with this, or my dad or my mom. So I guess it's sort of like all disease. It's really the predisposition that loads the gun, right? And then the environment, the experiences, the trauma that really starts firing it off. And then you
very compounding.
Yeah, it starts compounding. So how many folks out there Do you know, and can you maybe just roughly estimate how many folks have undergone a sexual trauma?
The stats sometimes change, but I think off the top of my head, and this may or may not be updated, but I think it's 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's so common.
it is very common, and that's also, it's hard to account for. Those are the people that report it. And going back to something you and I were discussing earlier when we were discussing rape, and sometimes viewing like, oh, sometimes you imagine that's someone that you don't know. When it's someone that you do know, whether it's a friend, a relative, your partner, usually that goes underreported because it's someone that you know. And sometimes there are many layers as to why someone might not share that when it's someone that they know. Why they might not share it, why they might not report it, why it might not go to court when it's someone that they know.
So it's likely that those statistics are overestimated. It's probably more.
Yeah, that's what I imagine. That's what I imagine. And there's also such a long period of time in which people sit with the experiences that they had before they actually share it. So usually it happens and they share it the next day. Sometimes it's decades that they're sitting on it, either for themselves, minimizing the impact of it and or the level of shame around that experience, or, trying to stuff it down. There's a lot of different reasons why someone doesn't share that until later in their lives. But usually if and when they do share it, usually it is due to them coming to the realization that this is having an impact on me in some way, shape, or form.
And they see it down the line in the future, and especially with partners, probably.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, that statistic, because I'm thinking to myself, it's like, if I go to the movies and I'm in the movie theater, there's multiple men and multiple women who have had sexual abuse in that theater with me, right? If it's a full theater, right? The first night, the premiere. And I'm thinking about it. It's like, those are pretty incredible stats that, 1 in 4 women, let's say it goes up, because it's fluctuating, like you said.
Yeah.
It's still crazy. Let's say it's 1 in 6 women. That's still a lot of women in this world who have had sexual abuse, sexual trauma. Would you say that more sexual traumas are coming from people that they know or people that they don't know?
People that they know.
Wow.
Yeah. I would say it's more usually, of course, not all the time, but usually it's people that they know. And that adds to the layer of trauma, because it's not only traumatic if it's someone that you don't know or someone that you met at a bar, but then if it's someone that you have learned to trust, someone that you're in a partnership with, like that bigger mind fuck, because not only does it erode and destroy and shatter the trust in that person, of course, then there is a relational betrayal rather than just a betrayal from, this person that I have no connection with.
Especially if you see that
betrayal
person.
Trauma.
Yeah, if you're seeing that person every day, how often is it, okay, so say in the context of people we know, is it more like, this is my boyfriend, this is my girlfriend, or this is a family member or extended family member? Is it more familial or not familial, would you say?
I would say in my experience, it would be more someone in their family rather than their partner. I definitely have had, and I definitely have had clients in which it's happening in their partnership or has happened in former partnerships. It unfortunately happens.
And I can imagine if it is in the family, or let's say the immediate family, how much of a burden, or let's say it's a stepfather or stepmother, how much of a burden that is every single day, waking up, being in the same household, being in the same kitchen, being in the same living room, dining room, right? And what the body's already confused and protecting itself every single day. I feel so much in my heart for young children or adolescents who are living in a place that they don't feel safe every day, all day. And their only safety is when they're not home. That's heartbreaking for me that a child is living like that.
Yeah, the chronic state of hypervigilance, the chronic state of fight, flight, freeze. And like, what is that doing to someone's health?
So Ned Mellow Magnesium is one of my favorite magnesium supplements that I take. It's a satchel in powder, and you mix it up in water. It's effervescent. It tastes good, and it gets right into your body really quick. I love it. So Ned's Mellow Magnesium is the most impactful 60 seconds of the day, right? The way I do it is I get into my morning routine and make sure that I'm taking my morning magnesium in water, so drinking a lot of water, and then feeling my feet on the ground, grounding myself, sipping the magnesium, and then getting my body going for the day. I take it because a lot of us are depleted in magnesium, even if we're eating a healthy diet, about 70% of us. Mellow Magnesium is a powerful supplement, but it's got amino acids, not just magnesium, and trace minerals. Taking this helps you reach your goals, right? Because what you're gonna find is that your memory's better, your mood's better, your brain functions better, your stress response, nerve and muscle health, and of course, overall sleep. With Ned's Mellow Magnesium, you'll find that you're sleeping better. You're less stressed, you have less inflammation and pain. Sleeping better from taking Mellow Magnesium has been a game changer. All of us know what it feels like to wake up rested, to being your highest self, to being energized, to being focused. What I love about Ned as a whole, their products are science-based. They are nature-backed solutions. They have on their CBD line a full premium CBD, full spectrum with active cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, and trichomes. They have a full spectrum hemp oil that nourishes the body's endocannabinoid system to offer functional support for stress, sleep, inflammation, and overall balance. Their CBD is cold extracted from the world's purest USDA certified organic hemp in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. It's the best of the best. It's pristine. Ned is a fully transparent company. They share all their third-party reports. Go to their website. You can see it for yourself. Become the best version of yourself. Get 15% off of Ned's products. Use the code DRG. Go to helloned.com/DRG. Enter the code DRG at checkout. That's HELLONED.com/DRG. You're going to get 15% off. Thank you, Ned, for sponsoring the show and offering our listeners a natural remedy for some of life's most common health issues. While we often hear that the average adult should get 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, that's not always possible. You know it and I know it. More and more people are focused to make lifestyle changes to get deeper sleep. Now, the good news is it's been shown that quality matters, yes, as much as quantity. But how exactly do you get deep sleep? How do you achieve it? Now, the first half of your night is the deep sleep window. This is when things start to drop, like your heart rate, your breathing, your blood pressure, your muscle activity. You really start getting in that state where you're falling asleep, and your body temperature. Now, this is important. Body temperature drop is a crucial aspect for deep sleep. Finding ways to activate that sleep switch can help you increase your levels of deep sleep. This is where the Chili Sleep comes in. Chili Sleep makes customizable, climate-controlled sleep solutions that help you improve your well-being. Chili Sleep makes the new Doc Pro, the Uller, and Cube sleep systems. These are hydro-powered, temperature-controlled mattress topper. You fit them right over your existing mattress, and they're gonna help provide an ideal sleep temperature. These are luxury mattress pads, and what happens is they keep your bed at the perfect temperature that help you with deep sleep, whether you sleep hot or cold. These systems are designed to help you stay asleep. And staying asleep gives you confidence and energy to move through your day the next day, right? As I always say, sleep is so important. Imagine waking up feeling refreshed, not tired, rejuvenated, right, and restored. Chili Sleep is able to make that happen. So what I love about Chili Sleep is that even if you have a partner, you can set their sleep temperature different from yours. So I know I'm sleeping at about 71 degrees every single night, and that's perfect for my body. I have yet to sweat in bed since I've gotten to Chili Sleep. Head over to chilisleep.com/DRG to learn more and save 30% off the purchase of any new sleep system that's offered and available exclusively to you, the Heal Thyself listener, for a limited time. Again, that's Chili, CHILI.com/DRG to take full advantage of this exclusive discount to all my favorite Heal Thyself listeners.
In relationships now, let's say that child or adolescent, let's work with that example, is now in a loving partnership. They found their match. They say, I want to marry this person. I live with this person. We love each other. I can imagine that sexually there are some things that come up, some roadblocks. How do people viewing, listening, who are identifying with this or know someone they can send this to and identify with, how do they start working towards this? What is it? Is it communication? Is it space? Is it taking it slow? Is it obviously seeing someone to talk through things? What are some tools that we can start looking for?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that comes to mind is someone getting to know their own body and the relationship to their body and the relationship to themselves sexually very well, because that will set the tone and the foundation of what they welcome into their lives sexually, how they learn what they like, what they don't like, anything in between, is learning that with yourself. And sometimes it can get tricky for many reasons, but one thing I also like to be mindful of is, for some people, they practice a certain religion in which masturbation is off the table. So maybe it's either fine tuning that it's not masturbation, it's like self-exploration of body that may or may not involve the genitals, but is really getting in tune to learning one's own, like giving yourself touch and receiving that touch and being able to track what is happening in my body when I'm doing this. Because if someone has a lot of difficulty or anxiety or shame being able to self-explore their own body, it will limit the way in which they can enjoy that experience with a partner or with partners. So that would be a huge piece.
From the get-go, just really
from the get-go,
getting in touch with your body. Go slow, go fast, whatever it is, but start really, like you said, tracking, if I understand correctly, different parts of your body and go, I'm comfortable here. This feels actually really nice. This actually feels a little, and you're saying people are being able to identify these things through self? Because sometimes I would think if someone else is doing it, then you start really manifesting and you only feel comfortable with yourself. But you're saying through self-exploration, you can really start tracking it?
Yeah. Because I would say there are many clients I've worked with in which self-exploration of their own body can be very triggering because of the level of trauma that they've experienced. So touching certain parts of their own body. So no one is present for this. It's them with themselves. That them touching certain parts of their body is highly triggering. A lot of people may not think about how common that can be.
And you think about it, there's the layers, right? It's okay. Yeah. I had sexual trauma, and now I'm exploring myself. This might be uncomfortable. Oh yeah, but also my religion, my family, my school, my mentors had all say I can't masturbate because this is evil or not acceptable. So then, that's another barrier to get through. Like, is this okay for me to even do psychologically?
Yeah. And there can be such a cognitive dissonance for someone when they're wanting to be sex positive, they're wanting to discover or rediscover or reclaim their sexual health. And then if they have other either people, community, religion, like other things in their life that are saying otherwise or don't do it that way, do it this way, it can just add to the confusion of like, okay, how do I do this? And in a way that feels that it's aligned with the different values I have and that it's congruent with how I want to show up in the world without experiencing this massive level of shame around it.
So those folks who are doing the self-exploration exercise, getting in touch with their body, touching different parts of their body, what happens when they reach a part of their body where their heart starts beating, they start sweating, they start becoming short of breath? What happens then?
Yeah. And that's why it can be really helpful that someone is doing this on their own first, because they have control around pausing and not, for example, feeling guilty about it because they don't want to hurt their partner's feelings by pausing at a certain moment. Like they get to say like, oh, I'm noticing that I'm about to like have a panic attack, for example, or I'm noticing I'm about to burst into tears, or like they're noticing they're about to have a response that they can pause there. And let's say they're touching a certain part of their body. They can either keep their hand there and regulate their emotions through that rather than like, oh, like they might get scared, in which it's an automatic response that they move their hand quickly away from that part of their body. But it is really finding a balance of gently challenging oneself and then also knowing where your edge is. Because I wouldn't also want someone to inadvertently re-traumatize themselves when they're just like, oh, I'm just going to push through this. And they're doing certain exercises or have partnered sex in which like, oh, let me just push through this. I'm going to push this through this trauma. They can actually re-traumatize themselves depending on how they're going about that.
Interesting. So be gentle with yourself. And if you're called to move your hand and go, I can't take this right now, then do that and honor it. But if you feel called to really maybe just start facing it a little bit, feel those emotions, keep your hand in the spot you're saying, start regulating, maybe breathing, maybe calming down. Maybe when I do emotional release, I do some exercises where I actually say, the spot that you're in, bring your awareness to right under that spot. And imagine that you're there, that you can see up and see my hand or your hand. It's obviously going to be your hand, and see your hand, and then really start visualizing your hand. So you can really bring yourself into that space and bring some calmness, some nervous system relaxation around it. And I love this exercise because it can be so powerful at reconnecting you to your own body, but also connecting you to the parts of your body that are, oh, whoa, this does not feel safe. And it's sometimes difficult, like you said, with a partner, when they're touching you there and you don't want to say anything, you don't want to hurt their feelings, you don't want to stop the experience, you don't want to say, you don't want to be the one to say, I actually feel like crying right now, or like I can't breathe. So really start with yourself. You're saying that this is part of the Heal Thyself philosophy. Do it yourself. Work with yourself, and then really start connecting to that part of you. How successful is this sort of practice with your clients?
I would say it is very beneficial for people. It is very beneficial, and it is a go at your own pace, while I'm also gently nudging someone, because, understandably, there can also be a lot of fear, reluctance, avoidance in doing some of these things. So it really is a slow, gentle process. Because even if I even think steps before someone is, touching their own body, for some people, they can feel triggered visualizing touching their own body. So sometimes it's starting with that. What is coming up for you when you're visualizing touching different parts of your body? For some people, they can have a lot of anxiety visualizing and they're not touching their body yet. So it really is tailored to what someone is struggling with, because for someone that, visualizing might not be an issue, they're like, I can go straight to touching. But for someone else that can cause massive anxiety.
I can see how it can be difficult for a man who has been only taught to pleasure themselves straight genital focus.
Through genitals,
Right, where female masturbation tends to be a little bit more sensual and full body in many ways. So how much resistance a man can have in saying, wait, what do you mean I'm going to touch my chest, my shoulder, my neck? No, I don't know about that. You know what I mean? So I can see that there even is an obstacle in a masculinity way. Being like, I'm uncomfortable with this. This may be too sensual, too feminine. But really the challenge is out there for any men listening or viewing to connect with your body, even if you don't think there's a sexual trauma. I think this exercise is just powerful for every single person.
Yes. Yeah. I very much so agree with that. There's actually Sensate Focus is the name of an exercise that I have clients do. Sometimes when you think about Sensate Focus, that the idea of that exercise, I guide clients through this. Usually it's when they're in a partnership or have a partner, but I definitely have had clients do it individually on their own, is being able to learn giving and receiving touch in a way that is not goal-oriented, not orgasm-oriented. It is learning to give and receive touch so you can learn what is pleasurable. It is about exploration. It is about learning that pleasure comes in all forms, whether or not it's sexual in nature. So it's like the physical intimacy, the physical touch around that. And there's a very guided way in which I have people do that, because different things can come up for people in which they get triggered, or we want to slow down in this part of the exercise before we move forward. There's a lot of that to it, but I think it is helpful for everyone, because there are some people too in which, like you were saying, they haven't experienced a sexual trauma. And at the same time, they haven't been all that attuned to their body either. So exercises like this really help them get into what physically feels pleasurable to me when I'm giving and receiving touch. And also giving and receiving touch, I'll put that in quotes, because when someone is giving touch, they could also be receiving something while they're giving touch because they like giving touch. So they're getting something out of that too. So there's a reciprocity happening there. There's a lot of people that I also have worked with in which when they do go through Sensate Focus exercises, and they could have been with each other for 10, 15, 20 years. And they're like, oh, holy shit. Like we haven't touched each other in this way either in a very long time, if at all ever, because of how mindful that touch is and because of how intentional, and it's coming from a place of curiosity. And for a lot of people, maybe they're not engaging in physical touch and physical intimacy in that way with people.
And this just opens the door for real true sexual authenticity, because so many of us have fell into the paradigm of penetration, intercourse, orgasm, genital focus, porn-centric sexual experiences. But a practice like this adds in and actually gives space and reverence to sensuality and connection, and even a spiritual, energetic connection during this with your partner, if you allow it. It adds another layer to the sexual experience, right? That in itself, just the self-exploration and then communicating with that and then exploring with each other, it can be a foreplay in itself, even before anything that has to do with oral. And it's a beautiful tool that a lot of couples or people who are in partnership or even just with a partner sexually can start integrating. Very, very useful stuff. And over the past years, I've been hearing so much about what sex really is versus what I believed it to be, you know, for so much of my life. And then seeing people like you open the door and give permission for men and women to understand that sex isn't just a one-on-one thing that you put on your calendar or after the kids fall asleep. It's actually an experience which has way more depth than we give credit to, and is way more pleasurable than we give credit to.
Expansive.
Yeah, more expansive. So how many of us and people coming to you are seeing sex for just the narrow walls and going like, oh, I thought this was only sex. Is that really common?
Yeah, it is really common, unfortunately, which also can add anxiety for people when they view sex a certain way. And if whether their body is not working in a way that they want it to in order to have the sex that they think is the right way to have sex, there can be a lot of shame around it. There can be a lot of anxiety around it because they're like, oh, this isn't working. I'm quote unquote, I'm failing at this. When really it's just that is one way in which people express themselves sexually. If we think like a common way for people, if it's a heterosexual couple, let's say it's like penis and vagina sex. And that's oftentimes how people define like, oh, that's sex. But then that's such a limited way of being able to view it. And one thing that you mentioned a few moments ago, when you said foreplay, you use that term. And I forget if we talked about this before, but with my clients, and this is, kind of popular in sex therapy community, is trying to shift that language from foreplay to outer course. And one reason why I really like that is because language is so powerful. And when we think about foreplay, that implies that whatever these activities are come before the main act, which for some people oftentimes is intercourse. So with that language, it just is like, oh, these things are just foreplay. But then we're really doing this to build up to this main thing.
Right.
But when we shift that language to outer course versus intercourse, it's like, oh, outer course or outer play. We're doing all these other things. And there's not a hierarchy around this, that this sex is more important or more valuable than this type of sex. It's like, it's all sex, just manifesting in different ways. So I like to shift that language for people of, instead of foreplay, that it's outer course. And also that the foreplay or the outer course it doesn't have to only start right before someone is about to have a sexual experience. That can start after your last orgasm. So the anticipation that someone can be building for a sexual experience with someone or with their partner, it doesn't have to be right before we're about to have any sort of sex. Like that can be anticipation that's building over a few hours, a few days, or a few weeks, and how that even expands someone's sexual experience even more.
If you even think of, no one really thinks about it that way, right? Well, foreplay or out, of course, we would think that it's within the bedroom walls or wherever you are, but it comes before that even, which is beautiful to hear, because it's like, whoa, this process has been starting. I love the idea that there's no hierarchy, right? Because I got a vision of a pyramid falling and then just like a big field with all these different activations. And one of those activations is intercourse, but other activations are just like mutual body touching and breathing together and maybe tantric. It's all within the same like field. There's nothing, you're not leading into anything, which I can see how it can be a cognitive issue, like cognitive dissonance issue, where they're like, what do you mean? No, this isn't sex. This is just something else. Because we've been so deeply ingrained. It's in our psyche. It's burned into there. It's imprinted that, no, we didn't have sex, because sex has to be intercourse and some sort of orgasm. But how liberating.
Liberating. And I also want to add on to something that you just said, that for a lot of people, if sex has been viewed as penis and vagina sex, how that is also not inclusive of people that don't have those body parts, and how that can minimize their sexual experience, in which they don't have those body parts to be able to have sexual play, and they're experiencing like a lot more orgasms than other people. But then if their sex gets minimized, it's like, oh, that's not real sex.
Element's a tasty electrolyte drink with everything you need and none of the crap that you don't. This means it's got a lot of salt, which is good, right? There's a big fallacy about salt and no sugar. It contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. It's got none of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, none of that BS. Element is formulated to help any electrolyte need. It's perfectly suited for whatever lifestyle of diet that you have. Now, it's super important to replenish your electrolytes. You know this, I talk about this all the time. Whether you're in a sauna or you're working out or you're just moving around day to day, electrolytes facilitate hundreds of functions in the body, including nerve conduction, impulses throughout the body, hormonal regulation, nutrient absorption, fluid balance. Element, when you have the perfect amount of electrolytes in your body, is going to help reduce headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, sleeplessness, and other common issues that are connected to electrolyte deficiency. And when you sweat, the primary electrolyte that's lost is sodium. Athletes can lose up to 7 grams of sodium per day. And when it's not replaced, you're going to start getting muscle cramps and fatigue. Everyone needs to replenish electrolytes, not just athletes. If you're moving, if you're sweating, if you're alive, if you're a human, your body's utilizing electrolytes. You want to make sure you implement it into your routine. This is something that I use in my water every single day, whether it's 8 ounces or 32 or 64 ounces, I'm always putting some Element in there. So right now, Element is offering my listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packets free with any other Element order. It's a great way to try all 8 flavors. Get yours at drinkelement.com/DRG. The deal is only available through my link, so you must go to drinklmnt.com/DRG. And Element offers no questions asked refunds, totally risk-free. If you ain't got nothing to lose, thank you, Element.
So is it fair to say that mutual touching for 45 minutes, making out and then calling it a night, that counts as sex?
That can count as sex for someone. Absolutely.
That's mind-blowing because there's people listening that go, that ain't sex. That is foreplay. But you're saying it's all the same. It is in a field. It's not a hierarchy. It's just all these different
It is a form of sex.
Wow. Which is beautiful to hear, because I can see how a lot of men with performance issues have to take a deep breath.
Yes. And that I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that's partly what I was mentioning earlier around the anxiety. because I see that very often. And if someone is experiencing anxiety and it's manifesting in terms of erection issues, difficulty getting an erection, maintaining an erection, coming more quickly than they would like, some of those as examples. And because partly they're viewing, I need to please my partner with an erect penis, or I need to please my partner by having my penis inside of this person. And if it's solely focused on that, like, yeah, that's probably going to cause anxiety for a lot of people. If it's just like, oh, this is the way in which my partner is going to experience pleasure. But it's very limited. And if you think about all the other ways you can experience pleasure with your partner, that does not involve a penis or an erect penis or anything that looks like a penis. Just in that example, then it's just like the word you used earlier. It can be very liberating for people. Like, oh, wow, it doesn't have to look that way. And then that, for a lot of people, reduces their anxiety because they're just like, oh, I can have a lot of sexual play in many other ways. And then it helps reduce their anxiety. And then it actually helps their erection issues. And then they are able to have intercourse if they want to. But usually sometimes they do want to, but then they also, because they've explored other ways to either experience sexual pleasure solo or with a partner, then it's like not as important anymore. But their anxiety has then reduced. So it's just like,
The world needs a reframe. We need a reframe about what sex is. We need a reframe in the definition Webster's. We need everything to understand that sex is expansive. There's many activities. It's inclusive. Yeah, you don't need to be anxious. You can just be, just flow through it, right? Whatever you're called to do, as long as you're mutually and you create an experience with a partner and you're connecting. I mean, it's like, man, like for me, it's the connection. It's like, I don't even need to have intercourse, right? Like as long as the lights are beautiful, the music's beautiful, the scents are beautiful, man, I'm activated already. You know what I mean? Like that is pleasurable. I was talking to my partner and saying like, for me, more pleasurable than oral sex is hovering the hand over the body and me energetically feeling it. Like that is more pleasurable than being touched, because I can sense the power of a hand. I can sense like my energy starting to move, starting to vibrate. I can sense like my bodily functions opening, and that's such a beautiful thing. You know, people are different. And as a man, that's crazy to say, because men, whoa, I love oral sex, man. You know, like so many men like even prefer that. And as a man, I actually challenge all men viewing and listening to go, hey, let me explore. You know what set me off is the Goop episode that I saw. In the sexual one, where this man, all his life, believed that sex had to do with intercourse and genital focused. And then he was with Jaya, who was the sexual teacher, and he's laying down with his partner. And for the first time ever, he was exposed to just anticipation, energetic, hand over the body, breathing together as a couple. And this man, you saw it, they closed up on it. His chest started spasming, like this energy. And she's telling him, see, your energy's activated, and see and feel how it moves. And then it expanded and the energy's flowing. He starts tearing out of his eye. And it was so beautiful, because I'm like, this man, all of his life, this man was in his 40s, all of his life believed that sex was one thing. And in that moment, I saw his paradigm just expand, and it was beautiful. And I felt for that, because I had tears in my eyes, because I was like, I feel this. I feel this as a man, that we need to expand on what sex is and step into it authentically and be like, I deserve, just like my partner deserves, we deserve to mutually meet each other here. And it doesn't have to do with intercourse.
Yes. And like you said, going back to the word you said earlier, liberation. This is so highly and profoundly liberating for people when they have that paradigm shift and start not only reframing that from themselves, but also their body being aligned with that reframe. When those are aligned, magic. So where can someone learn about more like things that they can do? What can we explore? What is in the playground? Is there books? Is there online resources? Do we make an appointment with you and talk about all these things? How do we find out more how to integrate these things? Because there's a lot of people viewing and listening who go, this is new stuff to me.
What can me and my partner talk about tonight? And what can we explore? What can we do? What are some tools?
Yeah. Yeah. Communication is the biggest thing I would say that is very helpful in a process like this, because someone can be thinking a lot of these things and they're like, oh, I want to talk to my partner. I have questions about this. But then if they're not communicating it, if they do have a partner, if they're not communicating it with their partner, they're going to be limited as to what that can look like. So I think to even start off, it is having the opener of the conversation of, hey, I think it's important and it would mean a lot to me if we started talking about sex. And part of that is like, let us redefine what sex is for us, for us. So it's just starting with that, because that would be the meta communication. Can we talk about how to talk about this? And actually, when I think it was women specifically, there's been a research study done when women were asked open-ended question, what are the elements that help define how you experience the most sexual pleasure? And it was open-ended. So it wasn't, there's not like A, B, C, or D multiple choice, open-ended. The number one thing was, can we talk about sex? It was not the duration of sex. It was not what moves do you know how to do? It was not any of that. It was like, can we talk about it? And oftentimes people have difficulty talking about sex. And when I say talking about it, I mean really talking about it, like in a very vulnerable way, because talking about it doesn't necessarily just mean like, that there's kind of surface level talking about sex. And then there's really a deep dive into talking about sex that can be very, very vulnerable for people.
So the openness, the willingness for communication could be one of the healthiest things you can do in your relationship, is opening a space for, I love you. I care so much about you. Here is a space between you and me that you could talk about anything with sex. If all of a sudden you want to experience and explore this, I'm with you. Here's my boundary. But here, let's explore together, because I want you to be feeling free, feeling liberated, feeling seen. If we can have those communications about that, because how many people are in a relationship, in a marriage, and afraid to say, hey, I want to explore other people. I want to explore BDSM. I want to explore this just between us, this sexual act between us. There's so much fear, and rightfully so, because we live in a fearful society as it is. But how beautiful it feels to just have an open communication about sex with your partner.
Yeah, and the freedom that also offers, and the paradox of, oftentimes people are wanting to experience the safety and the security of a partnership if they are in a partnership, and then also the novelty and the spontaneity and the adventure. And it's like, can we house that with this person or with these people? If someone has multiple partners, like, can we balance all of that? But in order to take the risk of saying, this is something I want to try sexually, or this is something that I want to try less of, and I know that you like it, like there's a risk involved in saying those things. In order to take the risk, oftentimes people need to feel safe. So there's like the foundation of safety in order to take the risk, or the safety or the foundation of trust in order to take the risk. But sometimes it's like what comes first? You need to take the risk in order to learn to trust someone, but then you also need the trust in order to take the risk. So it's kind of a balancing act around that.
But safety and spontaneous don't have to live in separate boxes anymore. They can be in the same box, and you can be safe with a partner and be spontaneous, just through open communication, meeting eye to eye, willingness to explore, and just jumping in there. What I want for everyone, and I'm such a firm believer, and I've been doing so many shows on sex lately, is because I'm such a firm believer that sexual health is one of the most depleted parts of our health in society, individually, as a whole. We are not looking at that. And sexual health drives so much of our health, especially from the creative aspect. And we have lost our sense of creativity because we lost our sense of sex and sexuality and sexual connection, and really sexual freedom and authenticity. This is what we're doing. We got an amazing expert. How do people find you? Where are they looking? How can they work with you? Where are you located? And give us all the goods.
Yeah, so the best way for people to find me would probably be my website. And that it's kind of a long website, but hopefully it's in show notes somewhere. But if someone's listening to this while they're driving or something, it is www.meraki.com. Meraki spelled MERAKI, counselingservices.com. They'll also probably be able to find me if they just Google my name, which is Christene Lozano, CHRISTENE LOZ as in zebra, ANO, Christene Lozano. Yeah, that'd probably be the best way for people to find me.
And you do telemedicine, because I was in California and you're all the way in Vermont, I believe.
Yeah. So I'm here still in Vermont. I work 100% virtually. Right. Most of my clients are in California. I do have some clients that are in different states. So it just depends on the state that you're in. I might have be able to meet with you. It just depends. You'd have to reach out for me to see what that can look like. But if you're in anywhere in California or anywhere in Vermont, then I can absolutely work with you virtually.
Fantastic. Everyone go reach out. You are wonderful in every single way, bringing things to light that need to be seen, the articulation, but the empowerment that needs to be with everyone that you work with, especially from vulnerable parts of you. Thank you so much for really giving us such great, fantastic information, from things like just trauma to then how it's manifesting at an older age, and then the things that we can do about it. And then amounting to how do we communicate with our partner? How do we feel sexual liberation and authenticity? This was such a filling up of the cup when it comes to sexual conversation, sex, sexual health. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate your work in this convo.
Yes, thank you for having me. And hopefully for anyone and everyone that is listening, that you found this helpful. I know a lot of these topics can be hard for people to talk about. There can be a lot of shame in talking about them. So please just start communicating, and it can go such a long way for your sexual health.
Amen to that. Thank you, Christene. We'll see you later.
Thank you.